feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled movie review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck. Alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, are you wearing a hat because it's a Disney studio release, or are you wearing a hat in honor of Lord and Savior Jared Leto playing the Hatbox Ghost?
Eric, I'm so tired that I was gonna make a hatbox joke, hatbox joke, too, because I look like I've been both of us. You've been up since 3 a.m. I've been
Matchbox 20
I went
song.
to bed.
3
I
a.m.
went to bed at 4 a.m. I'm exhausted. It looks like I've been haunted by the Hatbox Ghost.
Or just Jared
So,
Leto.
Yeah, hair's not so great today. So wearing the Disney World cap I got on my latest trip with my fam back in February, which I always meant to talk about on the show, but then I had a mental breakdown and we didn't record the main show for months. Will we get back to that? I want to,
I think
because
we will.
I do like talking about the vacations that I go on. I went to Disney World. I've gone to Vegas since then. I had a mental breakdown. Went to Universal Studios, but we'll talk about that on a different show, because today we are reviewing Justin Simeon's Haunted Mansion.
Or as it's
Which
known internationally as Mojo Dojo Casa
costs
Haunted Mansion.
house. God damn it. Go check out our Barbie and Oppenheimer Barbenheimer review, which is now available for everyone too. Eric, it's July, and you know what gets you into the mood? Haunted, spooky movies in July. How are you, other than being probably also very tired?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't haunted by the ghost of Jared Leto, who is still very much alive, unfortunately. No, I don't mean
It
any.
does haunt
He
you each and
does.
every movie.
He does.
he's in,
He
yeah.
in my review, it was literally the first sentence of why is he the Hatbox Ghost. You know what? We're at an interesting point at the year right now. You know, to think about the writer and actors strikes going on top.
Fully in support. No way of us
Yeah.
reviewing this movie is in, saying we're promoting the movie. We're just,
Reviewing the
doing our
film.
jobs as critics and reviewing the movie. Yeah.
So there's that, and with that comes delays, which I think is just on the side of the actors and the writers. And the studios need to pay their creatives and pay them what they're worth, and to have those residuals come in. And obviously that could also be another show unto itself. But just thinking about where we are at the end of July and, heading out into August before the festival season kind of begins, there's a lot of TIFF talk that we'll be getting to at some point as well. Horror movies, usually when they're dumped at the end of the summer, isn't the greatest sign. That's not always the case. Sometimes it's just that a studio doesn't know how to manage them, but Haunted Mansion is one of those movies that's already been done once with Eddie Murphy in 2003, the same year that Pirates of the Caribbean came out and kind of was this massive hit. Them trying to reboot it with Justin Simeon and in the director's chair, who previously directed Dear White People and Bad Hair, with a script by Katie Dippold, who also wrote...
He was a big fan of Ghosts.
Ghostbusters, the Paul Feig film, has been getting slammed, or I guess maybe in this case I should say slimed, by ectoplasm by critics. But to be honest, I don't think this is any worse than, say, something like The Goonies in a lot of ways. It's one of those films that feels very much geared towards a younger crowd that might be interested in the horror genre, that parents can watch with their kids and see if they are ready to kind of enjoy something that is supernatural, that's not completely horrific, but that's kind of bordering on that.
Yeah, start them with Haunted Mansion, move over to Hereditary next week.
Are they going to say Antichrist? And so, yeah, and I think it's like that perfect kind of like cult film that's going to speak to a lot of kids growing up in this generation. That, again, like The Goonies, when it came out, was not a success. It kind of became one later on as kids picked up on it with VHS and cable and things like that. And it's kind of in that zone. I don't think it's necessarily a great movie per se, but there is something that is great in the film, which is LaKeith Stanfield's performance. He goes harder than any actor in a movie called Haunted Mansion should. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, he's a great actor outside of Haunted Mansion, but you watch the performance and you see his work compared to Owen Wilson as a shady priest, or Tiffany Haddish as a kind of faux psychic, and Danny DeVito, all kind of chomping at the bit and chewing up
Yeah,
the
hamming it up
scenery.
a bit. Yeah.
And then you see this very earnest, thoughtful, considered portrayal of a former astrophysicist who is now a tour guide mourning the death of his wife and very skeptical towards the supernatural world in general. And that performance, in my opinion, is as Oscar worthy a role as Johnny Depp's performance as Captain Sparrow.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So it's, again, not a great movie, and it's not going to become an Oscar nominated film because the movie probably won't do well box office wise. But I think you look at this and you think to yourself, it's not that bad, really.
I'm 1,000% with you. I think it's fighting with itself a little bit with what you talked about, in that it feels like two different movies at times. There's this really kind of emotional core, this heartfelt performance to the movie, but then every time you kind of go back to that, it feels out of place from all of the kind of family friendly kind of horror stuff. But I'm a big fan of Disney parks. I love Disney World. I love Disneyland. I love theme parks, especially like elaborate movie themed one, which is why I love Universal Studios, why I love Walt Disney World. And I just like the tech behind them. And when you go on these rides that are mostly made for children, but even as an adult, I've come to appreciate, the storytelling and, like I said, the engineering or imagineering and the animatronics and all the special effects and things like that. So they are kind of, it's interesting when I see these rides adapted into movies where it never feels like, okay, maybe a 3-4 minute ride, which is fun for that thing. Is it really going to be worth stretching into 2 hours plus? And they proved that with Pirates of the Caribbean. They made what, 6 of those, 5 of those?
Yeah.
How many do they make?
I think
um
5 or
and they've
6.
tried with other things, Tomorrowland, Jungle Cruise more recently. There's many others. Um, with Haunted Mansion, I completely agree with you where this version is a perfect kind of gateway into kind of horror, spooky things to children. I think it's that kind of perfect 3 out of 5, not to spoil my rating, kind of movie that is perfectly enjoyable for the kind of 2 hours, maybe runs a little bit long. And that's where that kind of, um, fighting with itself in those two different movies in one kind of comes into play. But yeah, I think that there are some scares in that first half of the movie where if I was a young child between, like, 6 and 10 years old or something like that, you're probably going to, it's going to remind me of like when we saw Ghostbusters when we were young. And I remember that opening library scene scaring the shit out of me as a kid and stuff like that, right? Nowhere, this is not on the level of Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters also a very much a more adult
And you're
movie
talking
with
about the
adult
Ivan
themes and
Reitman
jokes.
film.
Yes. Sorry, I know I know Katie Dippold wrote the other one, so that, yeah, that is a little confusing. But yeah, the original Ghostbusters movie. So yeah, I think it's a perfectly enjoyable movie that has a really good performance from LaKeith Stanfield. I liked Owen Wilson quite a bit out of the people that are hamming it up the most. Like, I don't know, I just vibe with Owen Wilson, and Owen Wilson's playing Owen Wilson to an extent. Like,
He's amusing
he's not
himself,
doing any,
basically.
yeah, he's not doing anything groundbreaking, but like, I think the cast is fun. Like, I know I always kind of crap on Tiffany Haddish, and I just don't find her like a great actress, and I don't think she's a funny comedian, and I just find that, like, anytime I see her in a movie, it screams of someone performing something where I just kind of see them like really studying their lines and trying to deliver the dialogue as best as they can, and it never quite works. But in something like this, I think she's totally fine. Danny DeVito is always kind of fun. Just, I think I like him more in this than in something like Dumbo more recently out of like Disney stuff that he's done. Like Dumbo, completely forgettable. This movie, like, forgettable, but in a way that like is easy to throw on Disney Plus in October. I think that's like my biggest criticism, which isn't even really about the movie, is like, why are you releasing this in July? Like, I don't understand. Like, if this was October, I'd probably be like, yeah, you know what? Take your family out to go see it. If it's close to Halloween and your kids are into that kind of stuff, like, I think you'll have a really good time. It's just like, it's the middle of July. We just had two of the biggest movies of the year come out last week, and probably the biggest weekend for cinema since Avengers Endgame in 2019. And you had Mission Impossible a couple weeks back, and yes, counter programming. We mentioned all of this stuff in our Barbenheimer thing. So like a kids movie or family movie, not necessarily competing with Oppenheimer. I mean, Barbie to an extent, it is about a toy, but it's just weird that this is coming out in July, where I feel like, would it have hurt them to push this a couple months? I don't know what that does to like shareholders and when they promise certain release dates, but I'm like, with how dire the end of the year might be, to your point with like the SAG and WGA stuff, if stuff keeps moving, like you could have probably pushed this to October, and I feel like I would, be a little softer on it. That being said, still think it's enjoyable. That's not the movie's problem. The movie's is the movie, and I think it's like mildly enjoyable. Like, I enjoyed my 2 hours. Will I ever think of it again? Maybe when I'm at Disney World and I'm about to go on Haunted Mansion, I'm gonna go, oh yeah, remember that movie? That was kind of okay.
Remember that film
And
with
then I'll
Jared
never
Leto
think.
as the match?
Yeah. Matchbox Ghost.
See, now you've got me
Uh,
doing it.
So it's one of those movies that's like hard to even really talk about, because like I think the stuff you want to talk about the most is the LaKeith Stanfield stuff,
Yeah,
and like, without getting into spoilery stuff, that is the best stuff in the movie. It just, to me, I almost then see that as kind of a negative, where I just feel like it doesn't almost even belong in this movie. Like,
it
I'm
doesn't.
glad it's there. Like, I'm glad it's there, because at least that means, like, Justin Simeon wanted to put, it's not just kind of a fluff Disney, theme park ride movie. He tried to insert some emotion and story and depth into it, and like, it does work throughout. It's just kind of at odds with itself, because then you get back to this really kind of, silly, kind of sometimes spooky, but mostly silly kind of story about this haunted mansion. A lot of I'm not an expert by any means in Disney rides. Like, I'm a big fan, and haunted mansion wouldn't rank like super high on my rankings of like favorite dark rides at Disney and stuff like that, but I know there are people who love Haunted Mansion.
Now, is it
So
a
there are,
ride or is it an attraction? Because in the press notes, it kept saying it's a theme park attraction.
I know, I mean, that's just they're the same thing in my opinion.
Semantics,
A
right?
ride and yeah. Like, you could say a roller coaster's a ride and this is an attraction. It's a dark ride to me, and a dark ride, for people who aren't really theme park people. I'm not trying to mansplain theme park rides or anything, but like, I know there are a ton of people who just aren't theme park people, and but the Haunted Mansion is, a ride where you get on a track. It's constantly moving. Oh, I almost knocked over my giant iced coffee because I'm very tired.
Jesus.
Uh, it's the size of my head. You can keep the hat box ghost dead in here, right? And
He's
it's
in
just
your
like a
drink.
it's just like a slow ride where you're sitting in a chair and it goes through a track, and there's no thrills or anything. You're mostly watching the paintings move and the ghosts and the animatronics and like the special effects and stuff like that. So it's not those types of rides don't usually try to invoke any like excitement from thrills or anything. It's mostly an experience, and it tells kind of a story. Um, so this adapting that, it's pretty faithful to the ride, and it has a lot of, nods for people who, there's the obvious ones that they have, and then there are some more kind of deep cuts and Easter eggs that you'll see throughout the movies. Like, a stupid thing I noticed is like the chairs in the seance room look like the chairs you sit in and you go through Haunted Mansion, like little things like that. So you do see that there was like care and love for this ride. And as silly as it is, we got a Barbie movie last week that, on paper could have just been a Barbie movie, right? But then, Greta Gerwig tried to do something a little bit more with that. And this could have easily just been a theme park ride. And for the most part, or adaptation of a theme park ride. And for the most part, it is. But I think that LaKeith Stanfield stuff is really solid.
Yeah, even the theme or the idea of depression and grief being as possessive as an evil
Yeah.
spirit, that metaphor works here, and it works partly because of, again, LaKeith's performance and how empathetic and emotionally wrought it is at times. And another person that I think is actually really good in the movie is Rosario Dawson,
Yeah.
as Gabby, who's the owner of the Gracie
Of
Manor.
the titular haunted mansion.
Yeah, her and her son, Travis, played by Chase W. Dillon, come into the picture early on. And what's really smart about that script-wise is it doesn't waste a whole lot of time, even though it's still a long movie, it doesn't waste a lot of time convincing the grown-up in the situation that the house is haunted, because usually there's a whole 10 minutes worth of material where the kid or the children or somebody is trying to convince somebody else that there are ghosts or something haunting them, and it almost cuts that out completely and says, okay, well, we don't really want to waste time there, and we want to assemble this group that she enlists to kind of investigate it. And that's where you get that ragtag crew coming in who have to also stay there. And I think that even is an interesting idea or a fascinating concept of people that have to stay in this basically one location, comedy horror movie, because the spirits are haunting them outside of the manor and following them home. LaKeith Stanfield gets kind of like the dollar store version of the "I know what you did last summer" fisherman, haunting him at times.
I think I'm of like the Highliner fish and chips.
Yeah,
like
or
frozen
fisherman's
fish
friend.
guy.
But
Yeah.
there's moments there as well where like there's this weird ongoing joke about the place being renovated to be a bed and breakfast, and Ben, LaKeith Stanfield's character, doesn't really like bed and breakfast because they're too interactive with other people. You have to kind of be personable in some way.
Feel that.
The small talk, but it almost becomes a bed and breakfast with all these
Yeah.
characters gathering in a non-nuclear family scenario, which does weirdly feel sitcomish at times. And then there are other moments, like you said, where you have these gorgeous sets that have been kind of recreated based on the original attraction, and some stuff in there that is scary, but I almost wish Simeon was allowed to kind of like really go for it, because you can tell
Yeah.
I know he talked about it with when he was making Bad Hair, but you can really tell that he is a big fan of Tales from the Crypt, and horror anthologies and stuff like that. And you can see that on display here. And you can also see that Katie Dippold has this weird fascination with kind of almost like steampunk technology, because the camera equipment that Ben uses in the film to, take photos of ectoplasmic beings almost looks like something that the Ghostbusters in her script, in her film, directed by Paul Feig, would use. And those little things kind of feel like there's more of an identity here than just simply being, you know, basically an advertisement to come and see the attraction or go on the ride. And it still is that, again, to what you were saying earlier, but there is something underlying it with like, oh, some people put some care and dedication in it. Jamie Lee Curtis pops up briefly as as Madame Leota, which I kept thinking of Ray Liotta every time they say Leota, as a powerful medium her head stuck inside a crystal ball, and she's again chewing up the scenery, but doing so in a way that it's like, it's kind of a little bit of like, oh, she's a genre icon in so many ways. So it's perfect for her to come in and have some fun, kind of giving some exposition and moving out of the thing. But yeah, there's I understand being disappointed or just kind of considering this another attempt at making a big studio tentpole, but it's not awful. It's just kind of middle of the road, but still enjoyable for
honestly
what it is.
Better than I thought it was going to be, right? Which is like a positive for me.
You can put that on the poster. Better than I thought it would be. Matt Rohrbeck.
No, I genuinely like. I do think that like if you want, again, what we've been kind of saying since the beginning, like there's no harm in a kid that is, if you see your kids into Halloween or kind of into sort of Goosebumps books or whatever, are those still a thing? Like I would go
Fear
back and
Street
read
even,
Goosebumps.
like, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
not that they'll get into Fear Street, but that would be
yeah,
the next level when
right
they're
up.
teenagers or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, like I definitely think this is perfectly decent. And I will say, going back to, we were poking fun at Jared Leto, completely why?
Yep.
Like I don't understand. Like the Hatbox Ghost, a character on the ride that only recently got reintroduced, was part of the ride when it like originally launched, then got taken away, put back in like 2015 in Disneyland, and they're still working on putting him back in the Disney World ride. It's a moment at the end of the ride, and it's a cool animatronic and special effect that they do. But him being the main villain in the movie, and then it could have been played by anyone. Like I don't really think you get much out of being like, wow, it's Jared Leto. He's completely in makeup. He's doing a voice that's altered with, technology and stuff like that. Is like this literally could have been anyone. So like it's stuff like that where I'm like, is he much of a sell to be like, ooh, well, Jared Leto's the Hatbox Ghost, gotta go see Haunted Mansion, Academy Award winner. So I don't know. Like that kind of baffled me a little bit. And then there's a few cameos, which I guess I won't spoil here. I don't know if they're in the trailer or not, but some of them are like, okay, for like literally one scene, but sort of distracting. And I don't know if that added to much either. But
Yeah, the Hatbox Ghost could have been played by Rob Thomas of Matchbox 20, and it wouldn't have made any difference, performance
yeah,
wise. It's just really a one note character that when you're watching
yeah.
Leto do it, it just kind of feels like, okay, they need a celebrity in the role. And the funniest thing about this whole movie is seeing his credit at the beginning of the film, and Jared Leto is the
He's the only one.
Hatbox
He gets the
Ghost.
and credit and then the as credit as well, right? Because
Yeah.
it's like it's so silly. Like you could have gotten like a really good voice actor to probably play that role and then had something like that. Not saying that Jared Leto does a bad job, but it's just like, I mean, it's just like I wouldn't have known if you didn't have his name in the credits. If it was uncredited, I would have never gone, oh my God, that's Jared Leto. So
It's
anyways,
Jared
yeah,
Leto. What's he doing here?
um I don't have much else to say. Like I really do think it's, a mildly enjoyable, family friendly horror movie with a little bit of depth sprinkled in because of this emotional core. But again, I think maybe for also younger kids too, like some of that stuff is lost, and it might actually kind of hurt the movie when you're like, so I'm like, I guess that's there for the parents because it is this exploration of grief and things like that too. But I think when you try to do everything, sometimes it just doesn't really come together. But that being said, to your point, like it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5. I would say you don't need to go see it in theaters because it's July.
How dare
Like
you?
as much,
That is the
I don't
thinking
know.
I do not
I'm
like.
not.
You
I
can
know
watch
you don't
horror
agree with this.
movies.
Let me speak. Let me
No,
speak.
no.
I just, Eric, I get it. You can watch horror movies. If you watched
Yes.
Elf in July, you're a
Oh,
psychopath.
how the Grinch Stole
But like,
Christmas.
yeah, like you're a psycho. But like, if and I'm kidding, everyone. But watch whatever you want whenever you want. But I'm just saying, I'm just saying there's been so much this year. There's so much everywhere. To me, is like you can watch a horror movie anytime, but like, especially this kind of movie, like a haunted house kind of movie, I'm like, for families, I'm like, it just seems like October is a much better time for that.
Octoben.
And um, and I don't know. I just feel like you could wait. This will be on Disney Plus probably in August and then or September, and then you could probably watch this in October, closer to Halloween. I just feel like there's too much out there. Personally, I think there's nothing wrong with watching horror year round.
It's not illegal.
But certain horror movies I think are better at different times of the year too. This just feels like a Halloween movie. Like even
Right.
though it doesn't take place on Halloween or anything like that, like it just feels like a movie that, you know, would be great to watch in October. So if I'm on, Disney's marketing team, I'm going, well, that to me, there's so much out in the summer. Why don't we push things around a little bit? And then it's going to be on Disney Plus around that time. The movie's good, but not good enough for me to be like, go spend a lot of money to take your whole
Ghost
family to the
spend.
theater. Yeah. Like just wait, watch it on Disney Plus closer to Halloween. That's my recommendation. But you can go off. I know you
Well, no,
think you
no, no
can watch more or whatever.
I actually understand what you're saying. Where, from a financial point of view, this might have made a little bit more money if it was being released in October compared to now. But when it comes to watching horror movies in general, I mean, there's tons of proof. I mean, look at Jaws. You know, the
Yeah.
most popular blockbuster of all time was a summer release, changed literally.
That doesn't feel like a Halloween
No,
movie
no, no,
though.
no, no.
That's
I'm not
different.
saying Halloween. I'm saying horror
Yeah.
movies now in general,
Yeah,
right?
I
Because
push back
but
on
you
that
look,
for
but
Jaws.
well, but also The Conjuring, right?
Yeah, I
That was
know.
that was
Scream earlier this year, dude. Like or the last couple of
but
years.
The
So like
Conjuring specifically is, at least the first one, is a haunted house movie, right?
I
And so
agree.
that's a
Yeah.
summer release. It did really well.
I'd still prefer all horror movies. Just every week have 2 or 3 horror movies come out in October and then get away from the rest of the
How
year.
dare you? How dare
Um,
you?
no, I
You disgust me with
no,
your narrow-minded thinking of when a horror movie should and
I'm gonna be
should
the
be
guy
consumed.
standing at Disneyland. If someone's going on Haunted Mansion in January, I'm gonna go, "What the hell's wrong with you?"
I
No, I'm
actually
kidding.
tried to do
Um,
that when I was in LA, but it was closed. So,
yeah,
uh,
it was shut down for a while when we were there too, and then
yeah.
it did open back up, and we were able to kind of jump back on. Which Disney ride will get adapted next? I think we already know, right? Isn't it?
Space
What is
Mountain,
it?
or
Yeah, Space Mountain. We were talking about list
I'm giving it
of
a 3 out of
Disney.
5, by the way.
Oh, sorry, forgot.
And
I forgot.
I
Yeah,
think
who
it's a
cares?
perfectly middle of the road movie that a lot of people probably will end up catching up with on Disney Plus if they have it. And there will be a stronger effect if you do watch it during October, just to get in the mood and have fun with it. And it's not mean spirited either, which is nice. Like it, like a lot of, I love horror movies to death, but there are times where you feel a toll being taken on the character. And not every movie obviously, but there's a lot of stuff where, you know, you'll watch a slasher movie or a possession film or anything kind of in that zone, and you feel like, oh man, like watching Evil Dead Rise is a perfect example of
Yeah,
that, where, not that I'm taking a moral stance on it, but watching the family in that film be terrorized and mutilated and treated so poorly was a really strange choice on the director and the screenwriter's perspective, because the family is portrayed as decent people who have just had
yeah.
their father
That's
walk
kind of
out, and
my
you're kind of like, oh, this is.
dude. As I get older, I'm realizing like that kind of shit just doesn't sit well with me anymore. Like I don't know. Like I can't escape that feeling that you're talking about, and that's kind of how I felt during Cocaine Bear
Yeah.
as well. Like
You've always
where
had a thing
if
with
it's
like animal
yeah,
attacks though, because I remember we were talking about that with
yeah.
oh, I'm not Black Bear, Black Country, I think it was, or
Yep.
yeah, yeah,
Same thing where I felt it's way more visceral to me because there's something I know it happens, but there's something that I remove myself from in like a slasher where I don't find like, oh, someone's going to break into my house and stab me with a knife, right? Like,
yeah,
well, I live in Toronto, that might happen on the train, but like it's not like something I'm scared of where like or it happens to people that often. I know people get murdered all the time, people get stabbed all the time, but there's not like masked serial killers or like a demon coming after someone in their home, right? Like that stuff doesn't usually happen. Um so the stuff that feels more real, like an animal attack, and when it's gratuitously violent and just very intense, and I know that's sometimes the point and that can be important to show and things like that, but like there's this fine line where, you know, with Cocaine Bear making it a comedy when like half the people there weren't bad people or anything like that. And then in Backcountry, those are just, I know those can be like true stories and stuff too, that can be very intense. There's just something that is off putting about it to me when it feels like it's happened to real people or could happen to real people. Not saying people get attacked by bears all the time or anything like that either, but like that feels like more of a possibility than getting stabbed by a dude in a mask. So to me, that just feels not insensitive, but like Do you know what I'm saying? Kind of like, I don't know. It feels
Yeah,
more real,
well,
so it
it's
just
it's more
doesn't.
visceral though to you as well. Where like
Yeah,
what you're saying, I feel similar to. Again, like I'm not worried about a man in a hockey mask coming into my home and killing
yeah,
me, but that era of slasher films in the late 70s into the 80s, it kind of missed the point of what John Carpenter did with Halloween. Like it was disturbing and creepy and uncomfortable to watch at times, but there was
yeah,
artistry there and there was a point to the filmmaking where the
yeah.
lessons being taught afterwards, and you see this with the Friday the 13th movies, you see this with a lot of these kind
Right.
of slashers, is that it
Sex,
well,
drugs,
it
and
objectifies women,
murdering.
right?
Yeah,
And so,
yeah.
you have a serial killer usually stabbing a woman with a sharp phallic like
Yeah,
object,
yeah.
and it's usually because they've had sex or they've done drugs, and
This haunted mansion review took a turn.
a
Sorry
dark
to any
turn.
families listening.
No, but that's where, like, when you watch some of those movies, like the most notorious ones being like, I Spit on Your Grave, and some people have
Yeah.
reclaimed it as kind of being feminist in a way in how like it's portrayed, but there's something where it's like you're trying to sensationalize the graphic nature of murder, rape, all these horrible
And
things with
it
for
just doesn't interest
entertainment.
me anymore. And it doesn't interest me anymore. I mean, to each their own. Like if you find something out of that, then that's fine. It's why I didn't like what's it called at Sundance this year? Baby Cronenberg.
Infinity Pool.
Infinity Pool. And like I just don't. I know that there's some commentary there, and I get people getting something out of that, but like I'm not becoming more of a prude as I get older, but
A
like
Puritan.
I'm just like but then again, like I liked the Saw movies, which are on the extreme opposite end of that, which literally have no value and no social commentary or nothing really other than
But
like
they're also silly.
gratuitous. That's what I mean. And I think that's where I can remove myself, right? Is like when they're comically violent to the point of like, and I don't know, maybe I get something out of the goofiness, out of the creativity of the traps and how ridiculous they are. So again, I don't feel like it's like a something that could happen, but then it is means. But then there are, I guess it's not, because Jigsaw's trying to kill people who sort of did bad things. So it is this weird vigilante kind of thing
Well,
in
his
this fucked
logic
up
is the
way.
one thing where
So
I
like,
don't
oh, it doesn't
understand.
make any sense. But like at least that's maybe part of it why I don't mind seeing that. But as I get older, I'm just finding that stuff, and I forget how we even got here. Well, why were
Well,
we
even just
talking
quickly
about
with the
this?
Saw movies, like it's interesting
Yeah,
because when they started, that was the beginning of that wave with Eli Roth and Hostel and things like that of the torture porn era too, where a
yeah.
lot of people were talking about like, do you really want to see somebody mutilated horribly for
Not
you? And
really.
it's not usually the whole film either. It's usually like the last
Like a
act,
yeah,
right? And
or a
so
quick moment. Yeah,
yeah, and so that kind of came up a lot in like 2003 to 2008 or 9 when those movies were being made, and I think one of the most offensive ones of those was weirdly Roland Joffe's Captivity with Elisa Cuthbert in the
oh
lead
yeah,
role, which a lot of people have forgotten about now, but it's just interesting thinking that the guy who directed the Killing Fields and The Mission and then produced Super Mario Brothers went on to direct a torture porn movie.
yeah.
So yeah, it's just horror is just a really fascinating genre onto itself where I love it because I find it such a comforting thing, but the stuff that I love the most is kind of like the goofy B movie
Hmm.
stuff. And even though Sam Raimi's Evil Dead is a great film, there's stuff in that has been debated, and I think understandably so, the tree sequence in particular.
Yeah,
So it's yeah, I think you just have to be conscientious of like what you're watching and who you're watching it with, but then, like I'm excited to one day show my nephew like a movie like John Carpenter's The Thing. It's a gross film,
one of the best movies of all time.
but it's a great movie. There's artistry in there. I'll just
Yeah,
show him at
I
an
watched
age when he can handle it.
exactly. I watched the Midsummer director's cut on the weekend, and I think liked it even more than the first time I'd seen the movie, and I liked the director's cut even more because as violent can be, as fucked up and strange as it can be, is like there is something hauntingly gorgeous in that movie, and it is sort of saying something and things like that. So like I'm not team elevated horror or anything, but like I do need a little bit more than just, you know, gratuitous violence now, and just and being it mean spirited horror is what I just don't like. Kind of, it's like hurting good people, and I'm trying to watch that for entertainment. And I know it's just a movie, and I usually can remove myself, but like you still want to get engrossed and like into the movie. So when you're just good people, and I know it's like, oh, the final girl and all those kind of overcoming it and all those things, but when it's just good people getting murdered for an hour and a half, I'm just like, I can't. So even so, bringing it back full circle, like something like this, even though it is family friendly, is kind of nice that, like you said, it's never really mean spirited. It has a good vibe the whole time. You never like, but some good scares in that opening kind of, I think, first hour or so as well. Like I do think that there are some jump scares and stuff in this that will get kids, because like I don't really, that stuff doesn't bother me even in, you know, big boy horror movies, but like in this I was like, oh, if I was a kid that would have probably scared me. um Quickly before we go, because I think our reviews are always interesting when they're not just about the movies. We kind of, that's why this horror conversation was interesting. And before we go, I want to look at what, like, because with Barbie, I mean, people are calling it original movie with Oppenheimer and with Barbie, because it's not a superhero movie or something like that. So people, it's like, oh, it's an original movie. um I think it's interesting because we've gotten, Eric and I did this off the air when we saw Haunted Mansion, but
Oppenheimer.
you know, but Disney, you know, adapting their theme park rides, obviously Pirates of the Caribbean being like the big franchise from their things, but they've tried it before with Tower of Terror in
Oh,
1997. They
Scarlett
did
Johansson and Steve Gutenberg.
um yeah. And then they have Mission to Mars, which I did not even realize was based on the Disney ride. And then I go, well, it's titled the same thing as the Disney ride, which I will
Is
say
that the
right
Brian De
here.
Palma movie? Or is that the other one? Because there's Red
Yes,
Planet
it is
and
the Brian De Palma movie.
classic
Yeah.
Disney De
Which
Palma
did not
joint.
know De Palma adapted a Disney ride. And
Because
I
that
gotta
came out
say,
the same time as Red Planet. So there was the
yeah,
two Mars movies at that point.
Mission to Mars, the worst Disney ride. I will put that out there right now. It is trash. I hate it. It's awful. There's two different versions. There's like the easy version and the hard version. Do not ever do the hard version. I did that. It was a horrible mistake. It's awful. They try to make you feel like you're actually being launched into space. So like the pressure in your chest and like your vision, and it gives you like G-force to be like you're launching into space, and you just look out of this tiny hole. And Nevis and I had a panic attack, and we just were like, and they're like, don't close your eyes, it'll make you feel more sick, you have to look at the horizon or whatever. And it was the worst thing I've ever experienced. So there's that. We had Country Bears, we had the original Haunted Mansion, Tomorrowland, which, God, I wanted that movie to be great so badly, but like, you know, it was Brad Bird, you know, coming. Was this after Mission Impossible?
Yeah, it was after Ghost
Yeah.
Protocol.
I liked the vibe of like the, you know, the mystery box kind of thing it was doing, but just didn't really work. I've only seen it the one time and never gone back to it. um and then we had Jungle Cruise recently. So then coming up in the future, we have supposedly a new Pirates of the Caribbean movie from Joaquin Roning, and then Space Mountain is supposed to be coming out. We have Taika Waititi's Tower of Terror, um, which I didn't even realize he's signed on to like 80 million different things. So Scarlett Johansson was in the no, you're talking about
Oh, was it
Kristen
Kirsten
Dunst.
Dunst? Okay, because they
Yeah,
were the
Scarlett
kind of big at the
Johansson's in
same
the
time
new
as
one.
kids,
Yeah.
right? Okay, yeah.
Scarlett Johansson is attached to the new Tower
But the
of
Goot
Terror
was in
movie.
there, right?
Yeah, the Goot was there. And then a Jungle Cruise sequel, and then we're getting Big Thunder Mountain from Bert and Bertie, and then we're getting a Seth Rogen produced Figment movie, which, if people are Disney World fans, Figment, the mascot of Epcot, he is a purple dragon. And the Figment ride, also awful, but kind of fun, because it's so awful. So interesting stuff. We had Muppets Haunted Mansion that came out on Disney Plus last year as well. So just Haunted Mansion up, which, guess what, came out in October. Eric, are you excited for any of those?
No, but I might rewatch. It's been a very long time, obviously, since I've watched Tower of Terror. So I might.
Mission to Mars.
Oh God, no! I saw that once because I was going through like when I remember going through all of Brian De Palma's movies, and then I got to that because that was after the success of Mission Impossible, and he's always one of those guys that has one or
Wow,
two.
look at that! You do a Mission Impossible movie, then you do a bad Disney ride adaptation.
Exactly.
And then,
That's how it works. But he was De Palma's.
Can't wait for Christopher McQuarrie's fucking It's a Small World.
But yeah, De Palma was one of those guys that like always had a hit in like every decade, the way that like Wes Craven did, where De Palma with the 80s and the Untouchables and then Mission Impossible, and I think he was trying to like strike, you know, the lightning one more time and kind of like get in there. But he just, that movie, I never want to watch it again. But I just remember sitting there and thinking, man, this is so boring. And anybody, like Jared Leto being the Hatbox Ghost, anybody could have directed that film. It didn't need to be Brian De Palma, you know?
Good stuff. All right. Let us know what your favorite Disney attraction is in the comments below. Drop us a like, a follow, send it to your friends, a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Go over on Letterboxd, Untitled_movies. We're everywhere. Are we on Threads? We are on Threads. Do I keep forgetting Threads exists? Yes.
You just tweeted about it.
Did I freeze again?
You
if this
did.
corrupts my video, I'm gonna lose it. And if people watched our last thing, I can't believe this is happening.
I'm surprised
I
it
hope
is
doesn't.
happening because it's usually on my side that there's tech problems.
Failure reason, error. Their high quality audio stream from their microphone has stopped. What the hell? Can you still hear me?
I
Do
can still
sound
hear
fine?
you. You sound great.
Oh my God. All right. Let's wrap it up, everyone. We'll be back soon with more. As always, follow all my stuff on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
You can follow me on all the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Why is Jared Leto in this movie?